A big thank you to Imagine Belfast Festival of Ideas and Politics for making tonight possible. Thanks to the staff, our person in the background, Richard, who is helping us with technology tonight. Letter with Wings is hugely grateful to all the readers who are accepting to join us tonight. Thanks for your passion and determination towards the cause. Thank you for being here. Some housekeeping notice first. There will be no Q&A, but the chat is live throughout the event. So please feel free to contact us, drop a message in the chat, or afterwards by email or through our website or Facebook page. Please find our email address and links to Letters with Wings website in the chat. A bit of background to Letters with Wings. So Letters with Wings is an initiative of Northern Ireland-based poets. We are Nandi Jola, Maria McManus, Csilla, Toldy, and I. Letters with Wings promotes arts and defends the right of artists worldwide to responsible freedom of expression. In spring 2020, during the first lockdown, we discovered the possibility to form an emotional bond with those artists who are kept in prisons all over the world for speaking out and fighting for human rights. So on the 30th April, Poetry Day Ireland, we asked the public on Twitter and Facebook to engage with the stories of artists, listen to our page, and write and post poetic letters of solidarity. The days was immensely successful. We had more than 8,000 people visiting, interacting with the page. Letters from all over the world were written to 27 artists. The letters can be read in our website, so please visit it. Right in these days, we are sending 122 letters to 5 artists who have been released. We are waiting for sending the other letters because of the pandemic. Prisons are not still accepting materials from outside. Tonight, we invite our readers to talk about why art and activism can be intertwined. Why do some governments fear the arts? And why art can be a tool of resistance? Arts happen inside the walls of the prisons. The Irish poet Paula Meehan said, "Some of the greatest poetry in the world has been written in extreme states of imprisonment and isolation." From the Russian poets who wrote in the shadow of Stalin's terror to Yanis Ritsos' poems from the internment camps of the Greek Civil War and the regime of the colonels. And arts happen outside the walls, as a tool of resistance, hope, protest, connection with those who defend human rights. It's a form of awakening, but also a way to turn violence, rage, despair into transformation. This shifts greatly our perspective to a universal one. Tonight's event is dedicated to 2 fantastic women artists, Chimengul Awut and Nûdem Durak. Both of them have been imprisoned for being part of a persecuted minority. Uyghurs in China and Kurds in Turkey, 2 minorities who are subject to cultural and religious repressions, surveillance, arrest without charge. Chimengul Awut is a prominent Uyghur poet and editor of the Kashgar Publishing House. She was taken away to a Chinese concentration camp in July 2018. We will hear more about her and her current situation tonight from our guest reader, Aziz Isa Elkun. I hope he will be able to connect because he had internet connection problem. Nûdem Durak is an ethnic Kurdish singer, folk musician, and political prisoner from Turkey. Up until 1991, the Kurdish language was entirely banned in Turkey. A law passed that year allows the language for communication, but bans the purposefully vague spreading of propaganda. Durak was arrested in 2015 for terrorist propaganda and sentenced to 19 years. She's held in Type E closed prison in Mardin. I'm delighted to see among our audience some participants, some people from the Kurdistan magazine, who is a magazine who is talking about the Kurdish people in Turkey and talking about the situation of Nûdem Durak. So please visit their website. So now I am afraid that our first guest, Aziz, is still not able to connect to the Zoom meeting. So I go with our first reader. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next reader.
Viviana, sorry, I'm here.
Oh, perfect. Fantastic, Aziz. Thank you so much. Brilliant you were able to connect. Now, so it's my great pleasure to introduce you. Aziz is a Kurd poet, writer, academic, project director and board member of a Uyghur Pen Center. Aziz is a friend of Chimengul Awut. So Aziz, over to you.
Thank you so much inviting me for this webinar and talk about Chimengul Awut. Good evening, everybody. I'm very pleased to speak to you today. Yes, let me briefly introduce Chimengul Awut first. Chimengul Awut is a very well-known poet, and she was working for Kashgar Uyghur Publishing House. And she's not only a poet, she's also senior editor and also songwriter. Many of her songs became like a folk song for the Uyghur people. Still, we can see, even you type on YouTube, you can see Chimengul Awut's hundreds of her song texts. You can hear a beautiful song. She's participated editing many books, including Uyghur historical novels, like the one of the respected novelist. He also worked for Kashgar Publishing House, Mirza Kerim. He was very old age, but he worked very hard, published the three volume of Uyghur history, which dates back in 16th and 17th century, about the establishment and collapse of the Uyghur independent state in hÉireann. And Chimengul was editor of that book, and they also a colleague. But first, Mirza Haydar Karimi was arrested. He was about 78 or 80 years old, and very tragic. He died in prison, in the concentration camp, about a few months ago. That writer, and at that time, Chimengul also already gone. I have spoken to her last time. That was in August 2016 on the phone. We used to talk about poems, and we used to communicate on Chinese social media app called WeChat. And I was following her on the social media, but on 17th of July 2018, I spotted one of her message. She left on her profile, said in Uyghur, "My dear son, please don't cry. The whole world will cry for you." And I can understand something happened to her, but that was her last message, and she disappeared. So it's 2018 in July. Now it's 2020, and yeah, there's a report came out to the media about the Chinese government's building kind of massive concentration camps, and Chimengul also member of the Uyghur community. Uyghurs are Central Asian people. They are Turkic and they speak Altaic language like Uzbeks, Kazakhs, Tatars, and Uyghurs call their country East Turkestan or Uyghurstan. Chinese established the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in 1955, but the autonomous region status never implemented because before that, 5 years before that, in 1949, with support of Soviet Union, Chinese Communist Army, Chinese Liberation Army, we call Red Army, they illegally occupied Uyghurs' homeland, and until now, 72 years, they are colonizing the Uyghurs. But they couldn't persuade us to be kind of look like Han Chinese. Thanks to God, we were come to this world as a Uyghur, not Han Chinese, but they don't like Uyghurs in order to get that land and territory permanently part of China. So they are forcing the Uyghurs to be assimilated. And that's not enough. In 72 years, they couldn't achieve it. So they built mass concentration camps. I myself, now 4 years, I don't know any of my family members, my poet friends like Chimengul. So yes, there's rumors on the internet. Last year summer, there's a photo someone shared on social media saying that Chimengul was eating watermelon on the streets of Kashgar. I looked at that photo, but whatever happens, there's no uh, official announcement or responsibility from the Chinese government. Like thousands of Chimengul, thousands of writers, poets, all disappeared, and they are leading force for the Uyghur society as an intellectuals, leading the Uyghur community. And now, that time, when I read her last message, last poem, then I wrote a poem dedicated to her. Now I would like to share my poem with all of you. That was written in 1st November 2018. Chimankush. Chimankush means a flower bird. Chiman's flower. Kush means a bird. So Chimankush is Chimengul Awut's pen name. Always she writes her poem with the name Chimankush, and all Uyghurs know her name is Chimankush, but her official name is Chimengul. So my poem's title also Chimankush. Chimankush, the flower bird of Kashgar. The moment before the smell of hot summer went away, you were happy singing in the village. Your footprints were still fresh in the dust. So I said, I can't believe you have become a wilted flower. I can't believe you have become a caged bird. I want to break the lock of that cage. I want to curse all the locks in our world. I want to burn away all evil with my rage. Your poems will soar in the blue sky where you belong, because the sky is free, and like you, it can visit you through your narrow window when you feel sad. Chimankush, I know you were never afraid of the seasons. I know no one can cheat you. You will return one day. You will come back next spring, holding a bunch of flowers in your hand. If you don't come, the poplar trees won't blossom. The peach trees won't bloom in the town of Beshkarem. Swallows won't fly over the city of Kashgar. Life won't go on without you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aziz, for your words and your poem. It's my pleasure to introduce our next reader, Lia Mills. Lia is a chair of Irish Pen hÉireann. She is an Irish writer of novels, short stories, memoirs and essays. Among many awards, her most recent novel, Fallen, was a Dublin Belfast Two Cities One Book selection for 2016. Lia, over to you.
Thank you, Viviana. And I want to say thank you to Aziz as well for that beautiful poem. And I think cursing all the locks in the world could very well be a theme for tonight. But I would as soon take the sky is free. That fits in with some of the things I want to say. So first, I want to acknowledge the horrific circumstances and the courage of the two women who this event has been set up to honor, Chimengul Awut and Nûdem Durak. I also want to acknowledge what's happening in Myanmar, Burma at the moment, where poets and artists are included among the hundreds of people imprisoned and killed during unarmed protests. Other readers will read the work of Burmese poets tonight. I leave that to them. We take so much for granted, including the simple ability to dial into an event like this and speak freely, without fear of detention or torture, or the fear of losing everything, our jobs, our homes, our lives. You might ask, what difference does an event like this make? What is the point? If we are free to speak and other people aren't, how does one of those facts meet the other? At its most basic level, an event like this introduces us to people we might otherwise never hear about, people just like us, except that they live in more oppressive, authoritarian states, people whose freedom can be taken away because they write or say or paint what they think. What you do with the knowledge you gain here is up to you. The problem might seem too big for ordinary individuals to solve, but one positive step you can take is to decide to write to someone who's in prison tonight. Maybe someone whose words you will meet for the first time in the next hour. You may never know the difference your letter makes, but the testimonies of prisoners whose cases are monitored by PEN International tell us that a note or a card from a complete stranger can make the difference between light and darkness in a prison cell, just as art and literature can. PEN International was founded on the principle of goodwill and fellowship among people who care about literature and the freedom of expression on which democracy depends. One of the things PEN has become known for is that its members write letters to writers and artists who've been imprisoned because of their work. The same principle is behind Letters with Wings, who've organized this event. You might consider joining either or both of us. So one thing an event like this can do is to tell you who are listening about some of these courageous writers and activists, and importantly, encourage you to reach out and support someone who's been deprived of the kind of freedom we take for granted. There are details about how you can do this in the chat. Prisoners report that such letters make all the difference to them during unending, worrying days when they're cut off from family, friends, their future. It helps to know that people in the wider world know where they are and pay attention to what happens to them. It helps to remember that there is a wider world waiting for their return. One question we've been asked to address here is, why do some governments fear the arts? I think it's because the arts nurture and express human faculties that can't be obliterated by any external force or authoritarian regime. The imagination, the ability to empathize with other people, the capacities for love, hope, faith, idealism. The arts express what it is to be human in our time and place. And that brings news not everyone wants to hear, news that certain governments in particular want to suppress. So they bring in censorship, intimidation, vexatious lawsuits, punitive laws. They can try to suppress artistic freedom along with every other kind, but with art, it's harder to do because the work art does is not always out in the open. Art doesn't just live in the moment when an image is seen, understood, and felt, or when a poem is read. Much of it happens in our minds and hearts, in our imaginations. It takes root in us. It lives on when the moment has passed. You can't imprison a story or kill a song. I'm going to read some examples that demonstrate the extraordinary resilience and power the prisoners find in literature. The writing they continue to do against overwhelming odds is not bitter or negative. It's not about recrimination or hatred. These voices soar, they're free. They rise far above their immediate circumstance and call us to join them if we dare. To illustrate this principle, here's a poem by Eva Gore-Booth, a passionate advocate of the principles of nonviolence, written in 1918 to her sister Constance, who was in prison. The sisters had an arrangement that they would think about each other at the same time every day. The poem says that even when we're separated by prison walls, we can reach each other. Comrades, the peaceful night that round me flows breaks through your iron prison doors. Free through the world your spirit goes, forbidden hands are clasping yours. The wind is our confederate, the night has left her doors ajar. We meet beyond earth's barred gate, where all the world's wild rebels are. Next, I'll read an excerpt from a poem by İlhan Sami Çomak, imprisoned in Turkey at the age of 22, 27 years ago. İlhan is held in solitary confinement. 27 years, alone in a cell. What could he possibly write about? Life, love, light, and color. His mind, his imagination, his words are free. PEN Norway, Norske PEN, are running a brilliant campaign for İlhan, which includes people writing poems for him, to which he responds with poems of his own. I urge you to visit the website and learn more. The details are in the chat. So this is an excerpt from What Good is Reading Poetry, translated by Caroline Stockford. What good is reading poetry? It's good for making hands fine enough to touch silk, and for feeling the moment that stone turns impatient. It's good for looking in the eyes of hungry cats and extending curiosity out among all animals. It is the darkness that makes my night voice heard and makes it easier to say the moon will come up late. For years, my feet have been cold, so cold. When I say this, it helps me compare winter to snow. Spring will begin today, I know. Reading poetry helps me believe that feeling. And finally, from writer and journalist Ahmet Altan, currently serving a 10.5-year sentence in Turkey after being in pre-trial detention for over 3 years. He is 71 years old. This is from I Will Never See the World Again. I am a writer. I am neither where I am nor where I am not. Wherever you lock me up, I will travel the world with the wings of my infinite mind. Besides, I have friends all around the world who help me travel, most of whom I have never met. Each eye that reads what I have written, each voice that repeats my name, holds my hand like a little cloud and flies me over the lowlands, the springs, the forests, the seas, the towns and their streets. They host me quietly in their houses, in their halls, in their rooms. I travel the whole world in a prison cell. I possess an immunity. I'm protected by the steel armor of my books. I am writing this in a prison cell, but I am not in prison. I am a writer. I am neither where I am nor where I am not. You can imprison me, but you cannot keep me here, because like all writers, I have magic. I can pass through your walls with ease. And that, I think, is exactly why certain governments fear the arts. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lia, for your beautiful, important words. Thanks for remembering us of Ilan, Ahmed, and Eva. Our next reader is Catherine Dunne, board member of Irish Pen. Catherine is the author of 10 novels and 1 work of nonfiction. Her work has been translated into several languages. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you, Viviana. Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be here and there at the same time, listening to the words of the previous speakers. I'd like to thank Imagine Belfast and Viviana Fiorentino of Letters with Wings for the invitation to take part in this event. As we've heard, the evening is dedicated to the women artists Chimengul Awut and Nûdem Durak. Dedicated, in fact, to all those activists who use the arts to highlight the struggle for freedom from oppression that we see unfolding every day in the world around us. It's important to pay tribute to these women, and to do so in the virtual company of other artists is a great pleasure. This is one of those necessary occasions when art and activism are in active collaboration. Each of these artists, Chimengul Awut and Nûdem Durak, demonstrate their understanding of the power of the imagination to move people, either through their words or their music. We need the arts as a reminder of our humanity and our dignity, particularly when speaking truth to power. Many years ago, I came across Ellen Dissanayake, whose work explores how all animals, including humans, survive in their environments. She argues that all artistic activity in early human societies was not an individual activity at all, but a communal one. Her definition of art is making something special, something outside and above the everyday. She says that all artistic activities undertaken by our ancestors in common with their peers reinforced the group's cohesion, and in this way strengthened its bonds and helped to assure its survival. There is, she suggests, a loyalty, a feeling of belonging, a sense of being a member of something outside and beyond ourselves when we engage in artistic activity together. The ability of the arts to strengthen a community's bonds, to nurture loyalty, cohesion, and belonging, to reach for something higher. This is part of the reason why oppressive regimes fear the arts so much. They fear the power of the arts in bringing people together in common purpose. In Myanmar, for example, or Burma, as its poets still prefer to call it, poetry has been a channel of dissent since the British colonial era, which lasted from 1886 to 1948. In 2015, 11 poets were elected to Parliament. It is not surprising that writers have been on the front lines of this current uprising, a rebellion which has already, in shocking displays of deadly military force, claimed in excess of 100 lives, including children, and displaced thousands of villagers. In this poem entitled Warning, the Burmese-American poet Mo Shane Win reflects ironically on the ways in which oppressive regimes fear the power of the arts and artists. Her poem first appeared in Poetry International in 2018. If you encounter an artist at close range, remain calm. Pick up small children immediately, stand upright, maintain eye contact, back away slowly, collect branches, paint them white, observe the blue jay, skip lunch, drink wine, stay up late, very late, follow the breadcrumbs, call the cougars, call the mountain lions, document all sensations, be assertive. If approached, move arms as if swimming backwards in a lake. Speak intermittently, and above all, do not run. I took part recently, along with several other Irish women writers, in a project undertaken by frontline defenders and fighting words. We put together a publication entitled Yes, We Still Drink Coffee, a book of essays which explores the lives and work of those courageous women who are fighting for human rights in many different countries around the world. I worked with a Kuwaiti human rights defender, Adil Bukreis, who told me about the Bidoon. The word in Arabic means literally nothing. Nothing is the name given to this group of officially stateless people whose position in society would be similar to that of the Rohingya in Myanmar. Kuwait is an extraordinarily rich state, yet its discriminatory laws ban Bidoon children from receiving education, from being registered as citizens, from receiving even the most basic levels of care. They are othered by Kuwaiti society, outcasts in every way. The Bidoon have no time for dreaming, Adil told me. Their aim is simply to get to the end of each day alive. In response, she established a series of workshops entitled Discover and Dream, where the children engage with the imagination, where they discover a sense of community through art, where they learn to value themselves and to demand more of their lives and their government. It remains a powerful symbol of the marriage of art and activism, a stepping stone towards the Bidoons seeking human rights and freedom from oppression. But the relationship between art and activism does not lie only in its power to oppose oppression. It also lies in the power of its expression, the expression of optimism, of hope for the future, of reaching towards the light. In this extract from his poem, With a Lantern of Hope, the Burmese poet Tin Moy writes of the importance of home, of moving out of the darkness of his exile towards the light of freedom, equality, and dignity in his imprisoned homeland. This poem of yearning towards a brighter future becomes both the voice of hope and the whisper of solace. With a Lantern of Hope was first published in Poetry International 2013 and translated by Wei Yan Fon, Violet Cho, and David Gilbert. Someday, I will surely arrive at some point. Though our homeland is under darkness, it will be short-lived. Soon in the sky, dull darkness will clear. A brightly colored dawn will arrive. A journey of 10 years as short as a snap of the fingers. A poem will pack treasure. Enter the village gate. Greet hello, a chance to hug the public. But now atop a snow-covered mountain, while hoping for the light, singing homesick songs, lighting up a lantern of hope to keep singing of what I miss. Thank you. Keep safe and happy Easter.
Thanks so much, Catherine, for your incredibly powerful and moving words. It's my pleasure to introduce our next reader, Celia de Fréine, a member of No Small Talk. Celia is involved in many activist initiatives and writes in many genders in both Irish and English. To date, she has published 9 collections of poetry. Celia, over to you.
Thank you, Viviana. Thank you for inviting me to read. Thank you, Letters with Wings. Thank you, Imagine Belfast Festival. It is an honor to read as part of this event when art meets activism. And I am very much aware that I am reading from a place of privilege, from a country in which I may write pretty much as I wish, say what I want to say. And what I'm going to read now is a poem that I've just finished for Ilhan Sami Chomak, who was mentioned earlier. And although the poem is written for Ilhan, I want to dedicate this reading to all writers and artists who are in prison throughout the world. So I'll just talk briefly about the background to the poem and the ideas in it. I talk about a chance encounter that I had down in Connemara, down on a beach on Doleen, the coral strand. And in recent years, I've had quite a few of these encounters where I meet somebody and I know I'll never see them again. And it's not like in the old days, I'd meet somebody on the bus or somebody in the queue for fish and chips or whatever. These are very deep encounters and in which I make a real connection with the person, although I remember very little of what was said. And that's what I hope that this poem will be like, that it will be like an encounter. And the setting for it is, as I say, this beach. And when you're walking along from the beach, you can see these hills in the distance, and the hills change color depending on the sun, the strength of the sun, or depending on the clouds. And sometimes they're turned blue. And I always think of the Dennis Potter play, Blue Remembered Hills, which is of course a quote from the A.E. Houseman poem, which is, what are those blue remembered hills? What spires, what farms are those? And that's about the past. What's in the past, we'll never again reclaim it. It's over and done with. And in the poem, I say, although it's a simple poem, it took me a while to find the words to finish it. And then I realized that really, it's not important, or although the words are important, what's more important is the actual saying of it. And then I talk about a future, and the future I see it is looking over to an island from this beach, the island of Gorumna, in which the gorse is growing, the yellow gorse. So I'll read the poem. It's written in Irish and translated into English. So I read it in Irish first, and then I'll read the English translation. Focal, da Ilhan Sami Chomak. De chans a caso orame, vi me amui ag siúl mar bachanach lom, eschen court lay. Jed fi na canic a egal de chéan, a vani a nasca acu, fud fad an chosta. Hiasmid an sin, fa cuig nome jeg, dlú chora bun aging, an virt aging ag tiskent nach gasfi a chéile a rísmuid. Níl túram agam cer de dúru, acuháin gur bhain ar vocal macala as a chéile, ag airí a níos gur crochiú scá chlauta a rinne gorum na civne den a canic. Le míana anús tá focal a gurdach agam lena gur hagat. Jarmad jainta agam gur lú táhacht a bhfuil á rá, ná mar atá sa rá féin. Go grothíonn focal dia ruúin iad, scá chlauta a chléchlíonn an tír ghreach. Is cuma cé acu fána chinic na léhananta fadó, nó atin na tauci a mui an Ilan, ina gurtar lunner an óir is divna. Words for Ilhan Sami Chomak. It was a chance encounter. I was taking my usual walk. He was visiting for the day. The hills could be seen in the distance, linking sides all the way up the coast. We stood there for about 15 minutes, deep in conversation, both of us knowing our paths would never cross again. I have no idea of what was said, only that our words echoed off each other, rose up to create a cloud shadow that turned the hills to memory blue. For months now, I have searched for words to send you, having forgotten that what is said is less important than the saying of it, which, when be it the hillside of bygone days, or the future gorse out on the island, turned to deepest gold. Gurmila Mahagi, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Celia, for your beautiful, mesmerizing readings. It's a great pleasure to have tonight with us Evgeny Shtorn. Evgeny is a LGBT plus activist, organizer, scholar, and poet, and a recipient of the Gala's 2020 Person of the Year Award. Due to his involvement in civil social work, he was forced to leave Russia in 2018. Evgeny, over to you.
Thank you, Viviana. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone who is reading tonight, because I think it's so important to be vocal in support of those who just, in fairness, I think was less lucky than us. And yeah, so I'd like to read two different poems. One is mine, and another one is written by Ilya Ehrenburg in 40s and Stalinism. And I think like the language that he applies, he speaks about weather, he speaks about winter, spring, and summer, but he also speaks about so many different other things. And for me, that poetry was always a reminder that there are different realities, but in these different realities, like we don't have to forget about them, even if we are not there. And this so I will start with this poem, and then I will proceed with mine if we will still have time. Translated by Alexander Giventhal and Elise Wilson Egolf. Can ever children of the tropics, where in December roses bloom, where in thesauruses the topic of blizzard isn't granted room, can, in the lands where skies are azure and forecasts cannot go awry, where summer never stops to pleasure the body and amuse the eye, can ever they, let for an instant, in dreams, if even indistinct, let inadvertently, by instinct, grasp what it means to think of spring? What means in March when almost freezes the air and terror holds its grip, to hope for almost no reason for river ice to start its trip? And with such vintage winters known, such sorts of cold had to abide, that there remained nor grief nor groan, but only poverty and pride. And beat a little human beings, blindfolded by the snow sting, we could foresee, while hardly seeing, the overwhelming green of spring. So yeah, this was the first, and I'd like to kind of this overwhelming green of spring, this hope that I think only those who went through very hard experiences can feel to an extent that maybe is hard to understand for those who haven't been through certain circumstances. And I don't want to devalue anyone's experience. I just think that the hope is something that we don't really appreciate enough till this is the only thing that is left in our hands. So yeah, and I also would like to do I have time, Viviana, or maybe it's already?
Yes, please, Evgeny. Oh.
So yeah, the poem that Viviana liked, and I wanted to read it, and you have already mentioned Frontline Defenders. I was in 2019 at the conference, Dublin Platform, when they bring the people from all over the world, human rights defenders. And so I wrote a poetry which was inspired by that conference that I attended, and it is dedicated to the human rights defenders of the world. Endless string of airplanes, trains, buses, and taxis, from tropical selva, Central Asian steppes, ocean coasts, from thousands of unexplored points scattered around the map, like lentils on fatted parquet. Some of them, for the first time in their life, others take it as a work affair. They bring painted fabrics, pewter earrings, baklava or honey melons. They carry unclimbable mountains of sorrow, loss, pride, and human dignity, meeting each other. The dignity of cat is in graceful disobedience. The dignity of dog is in strict obedience. The dignity of a wild animal is that it would always prefer death to captivity. Human dignity, paradoxically, is in the same. And some more people, if circumstances come to that, prefer lack of freedom of body to the lack of freedom of mind, or the lack of freedom of conscience, or the lack of freedom of choice. They leave the house or lock themselves in offices. They grab the keyboard like a saving straw and give their bodies, their freedom, their life to words of justice, for which at all times, in all villages, people are arrested, tortured, and killed. But without these words, everything else loses its purpose and meaning. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Evgeny. It is true. I love your poems. And thanks for reminding us that there are different realities that we have to remember, even when we are not there. That's so important. So Letters with Wings is very pleased to have tonight Gianluca Costantini from Italy. Thanks so much, Gianluca, for joining us. Gianluca is an activist and visual artist censored on the web by the Turkish government. He has published comic stories on many newspapers, such as La Repubblica and Corriere della Sera in Italy, Le Monde Diplomatique in France, and among many others. His latest books is Libia for Mondadori. Gianluca will speak in Italian, and I'm very pleased to translate in English. Gianluca, please, over to you.
Hi. Buonasera, grazie per avermi invitato. Sono un artista e disegnatore e uso proprio il disegno come strumento di veicolazione dei miei messaggi. Il mio compito principale è quello di far sì che le persone usino i miei disegni per le loro azioni e per quello che vogliono difendere.
So I'm an artist, I draw, I'm a visual artist and I draw, and my drawing is for those people who need to protest to defend human rights.
Per me è molto importante che le persone usino i miei disegni, li portino nelle piazze, li usino nei social network e che li facciano loro, che non siano più miei.
For me, it's very important that my drawings are used by people, taken to the places. My drawings will become their own drawings by using them.
Con Viviana abbiamo pensato di parlare del caso Patrick Zaki, per il quale sto seguendo da oltre 14 mesi quello che gli succede. Adesso condivido lo schermo per farvi vedere quello che ho fatto.
With Viviana, we thought it would be important to talk about the case of Patrick Zaki. It is 14 months I'm working on this case, and I'm sharing my screen to show you some images.
Patrick Zaki è uno studente egiziano che studiava a Bologna, ha un masters che si chiama Gemma. Il 7 febbraio del 2020 è tornato in Egitto per trovare la sua famiglia ed è stato arrestato all'aeroporto del Cairo dai servizi segreti.
So Patrick Zaki is a student. He was studying in Italy, in Bologna, for a master's degree. On the 7th of September 2020, he came back to Egypt to visit his family, and he was arrested in the airport of Cairo. Sorry.
Patrick Zaki è stato dentro l'aeroporto per 17 ore, dove è stato torturato anche con le scariche elettriche. Dopodiché è stato trasferito al carcere di Monsura e poi, dove si trova tuttora, al carcere di Tora, un carcere molto famoso per essere uno dei peggiori e più terribili dell'Egitto.
So he was stopped in the airport for 17 hours and tortured, and then he was taken to the Monsur prison, and then to the Tora prison, that is known to be one of the hardest, horrible prison in Egypt.
Quando una persona viene arrestata, un attivista viene arrestato in Egitto, entra in un circolo che viene chiamato quello delle porte girevoli, e cioè della detenzione preventiva. Cioè ogni 45 giorni l'imputato si presenta davanti a un giudice che decide se far continuare la prevenzione, la detenzione, oppure di mandarlo a processo. Questa cosa può durare 2 anni.
So when an artist is imprisoned in Egypt, what happened is a process that is called of the wheeling doors. Every 45 days, his case is revised, and this happened for 2 years. So the fate is not, we don't know what is going on every 45 days.
Dopo 14 mesi Patrick è ancora in questo gioco della detenzione preventiva, aspettando un processo. Il 7 febbraio io ho fatto questo disegno che vedete e l'ho pubblicato subito su Twitter, quando alcuni attivisti egiziani mi hanno segnalato che un ragazzo che veniva dall'Italia era stato arrestato.
So Patrick is now, since the 7th of February, so 14 months in this game of the preventive incarcerations. And when I heard about this case, I made this drawing that you see in my screen.
Il disegno è stato subito utilizzato da Amnesty Italia come immagine della campagna, che è stata immediatamente realizzata, e da tantissime altre organizzazioni in Italia, e anche dalle persone comuni che hanno incominciato a stamparlo e appenderlo nei muri, attaccarlo nei muri delle città, oppure portandolo alle manifestazioni nelle piazze.
So this drawing was used in the campaign of Amnesty International Italy, many other campaigns, but also it was used by common people. People took this drawing and hung it all around in the cities, and it was taken to the places during protests.
Però dopo un mese circa in Italia è arrivato il lockdown a causa della pandemia, e quindi non si è potuto più fare nessuna manifestazione, non si è più potuto andare nelle strade con i disegni. Una persona mi ha avvisato che nella città di Bologna, la città dove Patrick studiava, c'era un grande spazio pubblicitario vuoto.
So during the first months of the first lockdown, 2020, we weren't not anymore allowed to go to the street and protest. But I was told that in Bologna there was a free space for advertisements.
E quindi ho preparato un fotomontaggio, l'ho pubblicato su Facebook, mettendo il disegno di Patrick su questo grande pannello e indirizzandolo al sindaco della città di Bologna. Questo è il post.
So I used this space using also Facebook to promote it, to put this drawing in defense of Patrick Zaki in one of the main squares of Bologna.
Dopo una settimana mi ha chiamato il sindaco della città di Bologna che mi ha detto che lo voleva fare veramente. E dopo appena 10 giorni in piazza Bologna è comparso il disegno grande 30 metri ed è rimasto in città per 10 giorni.
So after a week, I promote this drawing on Facebook and propose to use it for this empty space in the square. The mayor of Bologna called me, and at the end, this drawing went really for real in the square. It's a drawing of 30 meters and stayed there for 10 days.
Il caso Patrick Zaki è unico nella storia degli ultimi anni italiana perché tutti si sono uniti per la sua difesa e per la sua liberazione. Tutti gli strati della società civile, dagli studenti, dall'università, dalle istituzioni, dal semplice cittadino, tutti hanno appoggiato questa lotta. Tantissime città in Italia hanno dato la cittadinanza a Patrick, più di 30 mi sembra.
So this case is unique in a way because it was felt as important for everybody, every level of the society, from students, institutions, people on the streets, felt it was important to sustain this fight, to do this fight for defending Patrick.
Dopo che è stato tolto dalla facciata in piazza Bologna, un centro sociale autogestito della città ha organizzato un'altra azione con un mio disegno in cui Patrick Zaki veniva composto da 1500 fogli attaccati tra loro, in cui c'era anche Giulio Regeni, un altro caso molto importante in Italia.
So,
questo per far vedere che far vedere anche che anche i centri sociali, cioè non solo le istituzioni, ma anche i gruppi organizzati dei cittadini si sono mossi per Patrick.
So the next step was a campaign with a cultural center that helped Gianluca Costantini to promote the fight for defending Patrick Zaki. So this campaign consists of a huge draw made of 1,500 paper sheets. Together in this drawing we see Patrick and Giulio Regeni, another important Italian case. And this is very important because the cultural center was auto-organized by people, citizens, common citizens in the city of Bologna.
Poco tempo dopo il rettore dell'Università di Bologna ha preso una posizione molto forte e ha deciso di realizzare insieme a me questa installazione nella principale biblioteca dell'università, facendo vedere che Patrick è uno studente dell'università ed è uno studente come tutti gli altri. E abbiamo stampato 150 sagome e sono state posizionate per alcuni giorni nella biblioteca.
So this is another further step. This campaign was supported by the University of Bologna. It was very important because in the main library of the city appeared these 150 shapes of Patrick Zaki made by Gianluca, and again, it was very important because the university has a very important role in the city of Bologna.
È importante ricordare come l'Università di Bologna e il suo rettore abbia preso una posizione così importante di prima persona per Patrick, mentre l'altro caso importante italiano, Giulio Regeni, l'Università di Cambridge, dove lui studiava, non ha preso alcuna posizione per indagare sulla verità della sua morte.
It is important to outline that the rector of the University of Bologna, the institution, the University of Bologna, supported this case, while in the other case in the UK, sorry Gianluca, chi era in UK, the case of?
Giulio Regeni.
Oh yes, while in another case, Giulio Regeni, the University of Cambridge refused to support the campaign.
Le sagome dopo hanno incominciato a diventare di dominio pubblico, sono comparse nei festival, negli incontri letterari, nei cinema all'aperto, un po' in tutte le manifestazioni di questa ultima estate.
So the body shapes of Patrick Zaki circulated everywhere. Last summer, these shapes were everywhere, really everywhere in the city, in the region of Bologna.
L'ultimo che voglio ricordare, evento per Patrick, è stato fatto con una grande aquilone di 2 metri, in quanto in Egitto in settembre avevano vietato l'uso degli aquiloni perché dicevano che erano uno strumento di spionaggio.
The last campaign was a huge kite with a drawing of Patrick Zaki. And it was made this summer, and it was very important because why the kite? Because the kite was supposed to be an instrument of propaganda, so to say.
E in occasione del Festival degli Aquiloni della città di Cervia è stato costruito questo aquilone ed è stato fatto volare come simbolo di assoluta libertà, che è quello del volo, per rimarcare ancora la nostra richiesta della liberazione di Patrick.
So this festival of Cervia, a town in Italy, was the festival, the Kite Festival. It was an opportunity to celebrate the importance of freedom through the symbols of the kites, the flights, and again there was the draw of my draw of Patrick Zaki on the kite.
Grazie, ho finito.
Thank you so much, Gianluca. Such a beautiful campaign. Thanks so much for also recalling us about Patrick Zaki. So please follow Gianluca's blog and his campaign, because I think it's fabulous and very important. So now I hand over to Csilla Toldy, our other member of Letter Wings, who is now our chairperson. Csilla, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Viviana, and thank you, Gianluca. Vostro lavoro Activismo bellissimo. Grazie. So our next reader is Kate Ennals. Kate is board member of Irish Pen hÉireann. Kate has published 2 collections of poetry, At the Edge and Threads, and she runs At the Edge in Cavan. Kate, over to you.
Myself. Am I unmuted? You can hear me, great. Thank you, Viviana. I'm so delighted to be here. It's been an absolutely wonderful event so far. Beautiful words and poems with so many different aspects. And Gianluca, I think that was a fabulous idea, and Let's hope that Irish Pen can do something with that. Similar, we'll be stealing your ideas. So thank you very much. Viviana asked me as a poet to talk a little about why some governments fear the arts and why art can be a tool of resistance. In short, I think it's because art is an alternative form of power. It uses the tools of communications, that's words, ideas, and images. Art breathes possibility and change. And authoritarian governments don't like possibilities. Authoritarian governments don't like change. I'm going to talk in particular about poetry, but I think any creative person would say that art is an expression of truth, and that when an individual expresses his or herself through art, she will usually be expressing or reflecting the experience of many. Through art, one individual can be a voice to thousands, and governments don't like a lot of voices expressing themselves. Poetry, I think, is a tool of resistance because it praises, it describes, it suggests, and it protests. Most poems try to give meaning to everyday emotions, whether it's about war or pain, love, or life as we experience it. Poetry tries to make sense of the world around us, however dark and painful or glorious, by finding order, form, and rhythm in what we see and feel. Ruth Pradell, a British poet and novelist, describes this well. She said, quote, "Poetry combines two of the deepest human needs, to tell our pain and to make sense of it. A poem is language under pressure, the charged, memorable patterning of words in the smallest possible space." Personally, I love how Paul Muldoon, an Irish poet and musician, describes poetry. He says, "The point of poetry is to be acutely discomforting, to prod and to provoke, to poke us in the eye, to punch us in the nose, to knock us off our feet, to take our breath away. Powerful people don't like being poked in the eye or punched in the nose, nor do authoritarian governments. Talking of which, in Myanmar, Burma, today, over 100 more protesters today were murdered by the junta. This month, a number of poems have been amongst the thousands of courageous people. I've been amazed watching them, people involved in the protests. As we know, poets have been arrested and 2 killed. They were Mayant Zin and Kazar Win. And in their memory, I'd just like to read a short excerpt from a poem by Kazar Win, a poem he wrote when he was imprisoned before for lobbying for educational reform. It's a letter poem to his father, and it's translated by Coco Tet. Dear father, the river whose stomach was cut open has declared war on our tiny house on the bank, hasn't she? Right in front of the house, you must be looking out for someone who will help you with embankment poles to straighten the river, to fill her holes with sandbags in the murky water which rises like a bamboo lance. You must be gazing at the sesame plantation laden with fruits ready for harvest. You must be thinking a fistful of rice in your mouth is about to be fingered out. And the poem continues, but time restrains me, and I want to thank International Pen for giving me the permission to read it. I mentioned earlier that Ruth Pradell described poetry as being the last small space. I think the smallest poetic spaces must be land days, which are couplets created by Afghan women to express their opinions and feelings on sex, lust, men, family. Some have been published in a volume called I Am the Beggar of the World, which was put together by Lisa Griswold in 2016. Given the ruthlessness of the Taliban at that time, the land days were collected secretly, orally. If the women had been discovered writing land days, they would have been flogged or put to death. I'm going to read a few. I call your stone. One day you'll look and find I'm gone. May God destroy the Taliban and end their wars. They've made Afghan women into widows and whores. You sold me to an old man, father. May God destroy your home. I was your daughter. May your airplane crash and may the pilot die, that you are pouring bombs on my beloved Afghanistan. Making love to an old man is like fucking a shriveled cornstalk black with mold. Art is one of the body's most essential organs. In the last year, throughout the coronavirus pandemic, art has nurtured us. We read, wrote, cooked, painted, sang, drew. Art reflects our individuality, our freedom of thought, and our power to change. That is why some governments don't like art, and why art is a form of resistance. It gives us the power to express ourselves. Salman Rushdie in Satanic Verses reminds us what it is a poet does. It is to, quote, name the unnameable, to point at frauds, to take sides, start arguments, shape the world, and stop it going to sleep. I'm going to finish by reading a poem by Chimengul Awut, about who you heard before, a celebrated Uyghur poet. Before I do, I want to thank you all again, the organisers and the participants and all the people coming to listen and support this work, such amazing work. The poem is Cry Wind by Chimengul Awut. Cry wind for the leaves you have spilled, cry wind for the wounds you have severed, cry wind for the forests you have concealed. I will learn to cry from you. Cry wind for the flowers, the lilacs you scattered. Cry wind for the rivers held still with blue ice. Cry wind for the treeless courtyards. I will learn to cry from you. Let me offer the dark eyes I attend to my lover. Let me offer the heartbreak I utter to my lover. Cry wind, the bullet is in your heart is mine. I will learn to cry from you. Cry wind for the anguish of stones and mountains. Cry wind for the hopes and dreams of falcons. Cry wind for the torment of the lovers. I will learn to cry from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for these powerful words, Kate, and to remind us that how powerful poetry is. Our next reader is Moyra Donaldson. Moyra is an award-winning and critically acclaimed poet and creative writing facilitator from County Down, Northern Ireland. Moyra, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thanks very much for the opportunity to be part of this evening. I feel really honoured and humbled listening to all the work that is, all the words that have gone before. Why art can be a tool of resistance. I think part of that for me is the act of bearing witness. And like Csilla mentioned earlier on, I feel very privileged to live in a place where I can say more or less whatever I want. But there are dark forces in Northern Ireland that quite often don't get talked about. So I suppose the first poem I would like to read is about a young woman who was, as the term is here, disappeared. She was abducted and murdered, and her body still hasn't been found. And this happened very close to where I live. And this poem, her mother died a couple of years ago. It happened 16 years ago, and her mother died a couple of years ago without her body ever having been found. So I would like to read this poem. It's called Elegy for Patricia Dorian. To have your daughter taken and not know where to find her, not even the bones of her body that you carried in your body, the bones that belonged to you, her sweet baby bones. There was searching in sea tides, butts of cars, shachs and ditches, and holes in the ground and closed faces. Could the body of a girl be folded into an oil drum, sealed and dumped as if rubbish, the most appalling of places, and in your imagination, worse even, but not worse than not knowing? You wouldn't let them forget her. You begged for one man with a conscience. None were to be found. From posters in shops, on telegraph poles, newspaper articles, each new anniversary, year after ever, forever, your daughter still smiling at the gone world. And the second poem I'd like to read is from one of my favorite poets, Naomi Shihab Nye. The singer Paul Robeson was persecuted during his life for his political beliefs under McCarthyism. He refused to sign an affidavit saying that he wasn't a communist, and he had his passport taken away. And even though you didn't need a passport to move from America into Canada, he was stopped at the border and forbidden to cross. So this poem is what happened next. Cross that line. Paul Robeson stood on the northern border of the USA and sang into Canada, where a vast audience sat on folding chairs waiting to hear him. He sang into Canada. His voice left the USA when his body was not allowed to cross that line. Remind us again, brave friend, what countries may we sing into? What lines should we all be crossing? What songs travel toward us from far away to deepen our days? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moyra. This beautiful reading. It is a pleasure to have with us Antje Stehn from Italy. Antje was born in Germany. She lives in Italy. She is a poet, a visual artist, video producer, and art curator. She conceived Rucksack, a global poetry patchwork, an art installation that brings together people and languages, emphasizing the value of closeness. Antje, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Viviana, for inviting me. Thank you to all the other participants for the very strong, important words. So, can you see the image? Yes, good. So the Rucksack was born under the lockdown 1 year ago. I somehow wanted to do a rucksack, which means backpack in German, which is a symbol of traveling, which is prohibited still, and was somehow to counterpart this terrible sensation of lockdown. And I wanted to do it with little tea bags, because every morning I had this little tea bag and I've saved it. You know, during lockdown, everybody got some strange behaviors because you had to pass your day. So I started collecting all the things that I used. But then I thought, okay, I need some help from people because I can't drink so much tea to make a rucksack by myself. So I invited poet friends to participate with a poem and to collect tea bags for me. And this, I don't know why, but especially in Germany, people got crazy. They started collecting tea bags. They were so happy. They started sending poems. And so there was so much feedback that I started with the help of my collective. I have a collective called Poetry is My Passion in Milan. We are 3 women from different parts of the world. Ana Pedrosa from Cuba, Betty Gilmer from USA, and me from Germany. And we promote intercultural activities and events in Milan. So my collective said, let's do it a real call and a real public thing. So once the call was out, really lots of people, lots of poets all over the world answered, sent their poems and participated. So at the end, there were 250 participants with more than 56 different languages. And this was very interesting because among the first people that wanted to be with me in this adventure was a big poet Mamta Saga from India. She is also a social activist. And she brought 28 poets from India with 15 different languages. So somehow this rucksack became a kind of Babel on the contrary, because all these languages were very close together, and also the tea bags, the idea that you had a tea bag from Iceland near a tea bag from somebody who lives in Uzbekistan or in India or in South America was somehow freeing idea in the times of lockdown. And the project is very, very inclusive because there were nominates for Nobel Prize poets, and there were people that wrote the first poem in their life because they got inspired of the idea. So I want to show you some more pictures. Okay. So here you can see the rucksack with all the little tea bags, and in the background you can see the poems, because rucksack was exhibited in the...
Sorry for interrupting you. We cannot see your images. We just see white screen.
Ah, why?
Could you please stop the sharing and show
yes,
again, please? Thank you very much.
I can show it like this. I have a photo so you can see the installation, which is in the little museum of poetry, which is the only museum for poetry in the world, I think, which is in Piacenza in Italy. They got enthusiastic, and so this project was exhibited. It still is exhibited there. This museum is in an old church, Baroque church, so the surrounding is very, very nice. And this, what I wanted to say, I know the different languages and the different people from all over the world, what happened, somehow we connected. I mean, it was not just, I give you my poem and it's finished. Being in internet, for most of us, was the first time also doing online meetings. So you got to know other people from other countries. They proposed other meetings. So we went to festivals. We had mother language days in India. We had really, now we have every 2 weeks, we have an event where the participants from very different countries meet and get connected. And so somehow this was a very positive experience. And I don't know what's the time. So I wanted even Letters of Wings is part because some people even said, oh, let's do an exhibition also in my country. So now we have the idea to bring this project to Ireland. And there's the idea to bring it to India and to Macedonia. That is a very small country, but there is a very big poet community and very active. And so the thing is that really groups of poets that didn't have any connections, for example, Arab poets, it's very difficult for the language. So now in the project, there is Dalila Hiaoul from Morocco. She is a cultural activist in Rome, and she is speaking Italian and Arabic. So she will organize together with me the next meeting where we include the Arabic poets with the translation in Italian. We always organize these meetings in 2 languages, so really the audience can understand also. And I would like to read you a poem, a short poem, which reflects about violence. Because the question is, what is the opposite of violence? Non-violence? I think the opposite is empathy. And I think all human beings have this sense of empathy. It's a sense like seeing, hearing. But it's a sense that many, many people simply forgot about it or even kill in themselves. So this poem is called Empathy is a Learning Path. Lucy is dead. She fell from a 12-meter tree at the beginning of our history. And we straightened up, believing ourselves to be rational, spiritual beings with a special place between angels and animals. Yet our hearts are a noisy local market. The children have their hands full of sawn herbs. They crush spiders and ants. They chase each other with stones and sticks. And as strong men, they skip diplomatic procedures, the grammar of confrontation, act before the opponent does, and notify us with a tweet. Okay, let me come back. Yes, I finish here, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak about this project.
Thank you so much. This is very inspirational work, and it's lovely that you use so many languages and shed light on diversity and empower people from all over the world with your work. Sorry. So the next reader is Simone Theiss. She is a member of Amnesty International. She uses social media to campaign for human rights and to raise awareness for prisoners of conscience in the Middle East, in North Africa. You can follow her at siluna27wordpress.com. We will put it into the chat. It's yours now.
Thank you very much. I'm absolutely delighted that I'm invited. When I thought about the topic, when arts meets activism, I'm obviously not an artist myself and not a poet. I write about artists on my blog, and I campaign for human rights activists, and many of them are artists or poets. But I thought I would like to introduce you to someone who I think fits quite well. And she is an Iranian poet. And I thought, given that the evening is dedicated to very strong women artists, I should introduce you also to a woman artist. So the woman I'm speaking about is Goloroh Ibrahimei. She is an Iranian poet, writer, and human rights activist. She was born on the 30th of July, 1980. She is married to Arash Sodeghi. He's also a human rights activist. Both were arrested on the 6th of September, 2014. She was interrogated and threatened, and while she was interrogated, she could hear how her husband was beaten and kicked in the next cell. Then after 20 days, she was released on bail. The trial took place May and July 2015, and she was sentenced to 6 years in prison. For most of the sentence was based on an unpublished stories the authorities found in her house. It's a novel about a woman who watches a film about a woman who is stoned to death for adultery. And this protagonist in this novel is so angry about that she burns a copy of the Quran. And Iran was so angry about this unpublished story that she was sentenced to 5 years in prison for this unpublished story and 1 additional year for her posts on Facebook about political prisoners. She was then arrested on the 24th of October 2016, and her husband, who has been arrested a couple of months before, went on a hunger strike at the protest about her arrest. He was on hunger strike for 72 days, and then finally the authorities yielded his demands, and she was temporarily released on the 3rd of January 2017, but was rearrested. And I think if you look at the whole story from that time until now, it's a story of being released temporarily and being rearrested. There were more charges. She wrote an open letter together with another activist, Zatina Daimi, because Iran had organized a visit of foreign diplomats to Evin prison to show how wonderful Evin prison is, so that all the rumors are wrong. And I think Golroch and Athena highlighted that the diplomats were not shown to the wards, which are under the control of the Revolutionary Guards, and they were not shown to the salutary cells. So they were, as a retribution for this open letter, they were transferred to another prison. And again, Arash Sadeghi, Golroch and Athena went on hunger strike to protest against that. Finally, in May 2018, they were transferred back. She was then released in April 2019, but after only a few months, she was rearrested because of this open letter. She was sentenced to 2.1 years in prison. So she's currently in prison, and the last I know is from the beginning of January, when she was transferred to a central prison in Amol, Mazandaran province, which is in northern Iran. It's quite far for her parents to visit her. And also Arash is still in prison, and he's in another prison than her. I want to read 2 poems. One is called Couples in Prison, and the other one is called Counting Up, Counting Down. Couples in Prison is written in September 2017, so it's something she wrote in prison. And Counting Up, Counting Down was written in November 2017. I received both these poems from Richard Radcliffe. He's the husband of Nazanin Zaghari Radcliffe, who has been quite a long time together with Golroch and other women in the women's ward of Evin prison, and they wrote poetry, and he was able to get this poetry and we shared them on the blog and at events. And I think Richard said something which I found quite remarkable. He said, it was really powerful for the women to know that their voices has reached across the walls, and that despite all that happens in Iran's prison, the voices have not been silenced. So first, a very short poem, Couples in Prison. You are under the sky of the same city, just a little bit farther, and a wall between us as deep as a handspan. We drink tea with each other and shape clouds in our dreams together and experience not being with each other. And together, we watch the trace of migrating birds. Our date will be kissing the first star that twinkles at us every night. The second poem I want to read is called Counting Up, Counting Down. 1, 2, 3. I've counted the bricks in the wall. I've counted your notches on the walls of the cell that has devoured me. And now it has been years that I'm counting that man who is 1,000 bodies in a shower of bullets, with his eyes closed and hands tied up with a rope and feet in chains. I've counted that woman who's 1,000 women hanging from a gallows tree, whose feet stayed still when the wind swirled in her dress. I counted those virgin girls who had the freedom song on their red lips when their plaited hair, when just before execution, they turned to cry to the east of time, to the impudence of an action which planned to prevent them from belonging to heaven. I've counted the children of those rolled in blood, lamenting in distress over unknown graves. I've counted every second of this open-ended beginning, the dawnless night, this sewage, this decline and this reaction. This wall fills up with trembling notches. This picture the firmness of a generation of pain. The entangled notches are an alphabet that write the screams of the soon lips. Until then, the sun passes by without distress over my city hÉireann, that, as of many years ago, has slept, counting its own blood, and yet to wake up. I want to, at the very end, I thought I could invite Golroch virtually to join me. So let me just try that. So this is Golroch. And I would like to end and to ask you to support the campaign for Golroch's release, to support the campaign for Arash Sadeghi's release, and for all prisoners of conscience in Iran and beyond. And thank you for sharing my blog. I will also put a link to our new YouTube channel from my Amnesty group, because you can listen to watch videos of activists around the world, also to videos from Antje Stehn and two from Csilla Toldy for prisoners like Golroch. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for reminding us that women's rights are not respected in many parts of the world, and they are just as part of human rights. And how these women cope in the prisons is just amazing through the art and through poetry that they write. Our next reader is Nandi Jola. She is a member and co-founder of Letters with Wings. Nandi is a South African-born poet, facilitator, writer, artist, and storyteller. She came to Northern Ireland in 2001 and has since worked extensively in the arts. Nandi's one-woman verse performance, The Journey, was selected for International Literature Festival Dublin in October 2020. Nandi, please.
Thank you, Csilla. Thank you also to all the contributors. Thank you to Viviana, Imagine Festival. I would just like to close with a poem by Stella Nyanzi, who is a poet, a human rights activist, and also a medical anthropologist. Stella Nyanzi was arrested in 2017. She's from Uganda for insulting the president of Uganda. She was in prison for 18 months. And I was thinking which poem to read this evening. And her popular poem, which got her into trouble about the vagina. But I just decided that I would read this one. It just tells us so vividly about the journey that these activists, these poets, these human rights activists have to take when they go and defend themselves in courts, which is something of really a show. So this one is called Justice Delayed. Justice delayed. I wake up with rigor at 4 a.m. to race for space in the crowded bathroom. After sitting in twos for the fall-in count, I enthusiastically rush for search at the gate. I strip to be searched in the bra and knicker. I hand back my prison uniform and sit in the bus heading to court. After hours of waiting in the holding cell, I stand with hope in the suspect's dock, Your trial magistrate is indisposed. Court adjourned to a month away. You are further remanded to prison. What a disappointment. What an anticlimax. After a month of rotting in prison, I step again into the suspect's dock. The state prosecutors are on strike, adjourned to a month away, further remanded to prison. The following month was a repeat. Your trial magistrate is abroad. Case adjourned to a date next month. The next month, the court is closed for renovation. Therefore, and thereafter, the complainant is absent. And thereafter, the case file is lost. Adjournment after adjournment, perpetual, with no case business in between. This is how justice is delayed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nandi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nandi. And we are nearly ready to let you go. Here's a question to take away with you. How much does democracy mean to you? What we can still do? We also invite you all to send letters or poetic letters to Chimengul Awut and Nûdem Durak, but also to all our artists imprisoned that are on our web page. For this, please find Letters with Wind and Irish Pen website emails address in the chat. And please consider donating for sending and translating the letters in the languages of the prisoners. Details are on our website. So thank you. Thanks again to everyone, especially to all our readers tonight. Big clap. And thanks to all of you for coming. I'm putting in the chat right now the campaigns for Patrick Zaki from Gianluca Costantini that we already listened. There is the Gianluca is looking for a person translating the article that they put in the chat in Irish language. So please, if you know someone interested, let me know. And I also put the Facebook page of the campaigns to support Nûdem Durak and the Kurdistan magazine web page. Again, thank you everyone again. Good night.